Morning, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to today's extended day-ahead market congestion revenue allocation meeting to discuss the draft tariff language, which was posted on June 11th. My name is Christina Guimera, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that today's call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And please remember to keep your comments professional, respectful, and brief today. Next slide, please. To ask questions during the meeting, you can raise your hand by opening the participant and chat panels on the bottom right. You can then raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, or if you joined audio only, please press *3 on your device. And please remember to state your name and affiliation first before speaking. You can also send your comments and questions via chat to all panelists or directly to myself. And if you need any technical assistance during the meeting today, please send a chat to the event producer in Teller Events. Next slide, please. This is a visual representation of where we are in the stakeholder process. You can see that we are in the decision stage right before the tariff filing. Next slide, please. And today's agenda will cover reviewing the revised draft tariff language with John Anders. Afterwards, we'll wrap up for the day. So with that, I will turn things over to John Anders, Deputy General Counsel here at the ISO. John?
Thanks, Christina, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We appreciate the engagement and participation in this tariff stakeholder process. So we're here following the WEM board governing body and board approval last Thursday to review the draft tariff language that was posted and cover the stakeholder comments that came in last Friday and any others that we have here today. And we have plenty of time to get through all of this, get this right, and get everybody heard. There's not a lot of tariff language, but obviously it's important language, and we want to hear everyone's comments. We did review the comments, and we have already made some modifications to the draft tariff language that was posted. So that's the version we'll be going over today. We've made those changes and sort of track changes and highlighted them. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But you know, in essence, we received sort of two dimensions of comments from stakeholders. One dimension was sort of seeking some additional clarification in the language itself. We had drafted this, you know, basically as a as an insert to existing tariff language, and so we think we've added some additional language and moved a few things around, broken up a sentence and that kind of thing to enhance the clarity of the language. And then the other comment was really about the specificity of the tariff, the ISO's tariff, reference to the eligible transmission rights. And we heard the comments. There were comments on both sides of that question, and as you'll see, we've landed in line with the policy and the board memo, and the language that's been repeated throughout that process will be reflected in the tariff. We've modified it to, I think, be more clear and a little bit more precise, so we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to go ahead now and share my screen. Let's get that going. Make sure it's all working correctly. Okay, Christina, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, I'm able to see your screen.
Okay, good. And let me know if the sizing is appropriate or whatever. I think it's about right, but we can get there. So I'm going to go through, I mean, there's not a lot of changes, but I'll go through all of it just because we haven't had a walkthrough on the tariff language previously. So we'll, even though there weren't comments on some of this, we'll just touch on it. So the first change was really just a cross-reference clarification in terms of the CRR and the calculation of the hourly congestion funds. And it's just a clarification here. You can see it highlighted that this Part A in this provision, the portion of IFM congestions in that settlement period attributed to these constraints is not included in terms of the congestion difference allocation provided under the section in 3311 where it is established. So we didn't get any comments on that. It's really just a little bit of a cross-reference and clarification on how this relates back to the CRR congestion fund. So I'm going to move on, and if any point in time you want to ask any question about any of this, whether we're on it or not, just go ahead and raise your hand. I won't see it, but somebody will flag it for me, and we'll keep going. All right, so moving on. So we're going to get right into it now. So we get to this provision, which was existing tariff language. So anything you see here that's not redlined is existing approved tariff language, but not yet in effect. So all of section 3311 is not yet in effect and won't be until May 1 of 2026. There's some provisions, onboarding provisions that were accepted and in effect now, but not these provisions. So we're changing approved, but not pending, but currently not effective tariff language. But we've redlined it just like we would any other time. So here we're really talking about a cross-reference to what we're calling and what we previously called an adjustment. So these are adjustments to the total congestion revenue collected before the distribution to each balancing area. And so previously there was one adjustment, and the adjustment was really for ETC TORs in the CAISO balancing area and legacy contracts and transmission ownership rights in an EDAM balancing area. So those adjustments and that congestion reversal, it's performed by the ISO. It's sort of, if you will, taken off the top, and then that adjusts the total amount of congestion revenue that's then distributed to the balancing authority areas according to the formulations here and in the settlements and billing BPM. So what we've done is we've added another adjustment, and this is the adjustment that is made to account for the policy that was approved for this congestion revenue allocation proposal. And I'm going to go through the language here, and we'll get to what we've done. But what we thought we would do is the yellow is really about adding clarity, and we moved a few things around. So what we did was we just reordered the two adjustments. So we wanted to make the first adjustment, which is the ETC TOR and legacy rights first, because that is how it occurs in the settlements process. So we say following any adjustment. So we make the two adjustments. So we have the one that we've just talked about that has been here the whole time, A, and then we have B, and what we've done here is we've added a little bit of additional clarity. It used to previously just say the language that's stricken up here for congestion revenue associated with registered qualified. So here we heard from folks that they wanted a little bit more clarity in the cross-reference. It just wasn't clear what the adjustment was all about. And so we've added language to say that it's the adjustment associated with the congestion difference at nodes within a balancing area that result from constraints in another balancing area. And this, of course, is all within the EDAM area, but it's those nodes outside of that area and associated with registered the nodes are within the area and the constraints are outside of the area. And so it's the nodes that are associated with registered, qualified, and balanced day-ahead self-schedules. So that's the cross-reference, and then the real provision is down below in this new section 3311.1, which provides for the actual adjustment itself. So I'm going to move on down. Go ahead.
John, we actually just received a raised hand. Do you want to take time for questions right now?
Sure.
We have a hand raised by Doug Baccignone.
Hi, Doug Boccignone for the Bay Area Municipal Transmission Group. Just a suggestion, if we're going to talk about differences, shouldn't it be differences between the nodes?
Like that, Doug?
Yeah. I mean, that's right. We're talking about MCC differences between the nodes, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, John.
Okay. Well, thanks, Doug. I appreciate that. And that's the sort of feedback we like to hear. We don't always have it perfectly right, and clarity is what we're all seeking. So moving on, now we're going to go down. I don't know if I can get the whole thing on the same page. I'm just going to go ahead and just go like this, and I'll fix that later, but we'll see if we can get more of this on the same page to help us all out here. All right, so now we're talking about the adjustment itself. So the adjustment is, as we said above, it's the MCC adjustment. So what we've done is, and again, this was for additional clarification, and it came from stakeholders, and we think it's a useful cross-reference. There was some question about will determine, and it says the congestion difference. So how are we going to determine that congestion difference within the area? Well, it's really through the calculations that are detailed in the BPM for settlements and billing, and these are the calculations that determine the congestion offsets and all of the rest of the what we call the MCC breakdown and the price differences and the shift factors and all of those other things that go into that. I'm not the expert here, but in other parts of the tariff and in these parts of the tariff concerning congestion, revenue allocation, and the offsets and all of that, we don't include those detailed calculations, but we're happy to cross-reference to those calculations in the BPM, and these calculations will be updated for this initiative and published through the BPM process so that everybody can see the details and also have an opportunity to comment on those details, and of course then configure their systems to shadow the ISO settlement systems and all of that. So that's the first clarification, and again I sort of shaded it in blue because it was more significant. So then the second, we decided to break this up and threw in a period there and said that then once you determine this congestion difference according to all of these detailed calculations, that this congestion difference will be allocated to the balancing area where the qualified and balanced day-ahead self-schedule is associated. And then we wanted a cross-reference back up above that the balancing area then will provide this revenue to the EDAM transmission service providers within their balancing area, and they'll sub-allocate it as required above. Now, this is probably the sentence where we got the most comments and at least comments that were had different perspectives on what should be said here in the ISO tariff. And again, shaded it in blue, what we're proposing as the updated language. Previously, it included the yellow stricken language, and it said of a sufficient duration, and then such as firm, long-term, and monthly point-to-point, blah, 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 including conditional firm. So we really haven't changed the reference. I think we've just made it more clear. And we did this to align with, as I said earlier, the policy that's been developed, and this has been, throughout the policy presentations, the final policy proposal, and it's also in the board memo. It's quite specific. So in order to specify which rights are eligible for this adjustment across the EDAM area, in other words, all balancing areas, all transmission service providers, it needs to be in the ISO tariff. So we have landed here, and it basically says qualification for this adjustment will be afforded to, and then eligible long-term firm and monthly point-to-point and network integration transmission service rights, including conditional firm as defined under the EDAM transmission service provider tariff, period. And that's very consistent with the language in the policy. It's almost identical to the language included in the board memo. And so we feel this is an appropriate approach consistent with the policy and the approvals by the governing body and board. So I'll pause here, see if there's any comments, questions, or concerns about this.
Yes, we have one raised hand from Ken Donald. Go ahead, Ken.
Hi, am I unmuted? There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to drag you back all the way to the previous comment where we talked about between. I want to make it clear that the settlement math doesn't have a path where it is calculated. Ultimately, yes, I agree that because you include all nodes in the BAA in the calculation, that it in effect calculates the congestive difference between locations, but using the wording as it is seems to imply that there is knowledge of a path that energy is flowing on between this point and that point, and that's not the way the settlement math works. So I wonder if there's a way to reword that, such as the marginal cost of congestion contribution at nodes within the EDAM balancing authority area.
Yeah, Ken, I appreciate that. I think that is correct. So well, let's spend a little time here, and I'll just start with a comment. And I'm not a settlements expert, and we have them, but I don't disagree at all with you. And it is that contribution that we're really measuring and the difference between the two nodes. And one of the points I'll make is this is sort of ordering language. I mean, we added a little bit of clarification, rather than just saying and be under section 33.11.2.1, but our goal was to have the math, if you will, ensure the math is correct, through the calculations of all of that. And here you have, they're going to, determine through the calculations, the congestion difference from the contribution of qualified and balanced set of schedules to the marginal cost of congestion at each resource location and intertie in the EDAM area. So that's the math that you were just talking about, but we shouldn't be in conflict. So I'm happy to go back to at nodes.
I leave it to the group, and I don't want to take up too much time because it's a bit of a nit.
No,
but
no, it's not a nit.
I see it as contribution at instead of difference between. whatever the group decides. It's not, you have a handle on what the real math does later on in the document. So
Yeah, this was trying to be a little bit more, I think people were wanting something a little bit more visual or understandable and not getting into, without the math, that this seemed to be more aligned with what they understood the policy to be doing. I don't know, Doug, do you have any thoughts? I'll go back to Doug if he wants to unmute, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Stacy, could we please unmute Doug?
Doug Boccignone for BAMX. I mean, I appreciate the comment. I guess, though, like in the end, even though you're calculating the MCCs at every location appropriately, the only one that you're going to allocate the congestion revenues associated with these constraints are going to be those that are associated with the balanced qualifying schedules. And that's between two specific points. So kind of in a way, it is a path. And
at that stage of the game, when the EDAM entity is doing the math, yes, it is between 2 points. Well,
but the part that the ISO is allocating and leaving with the EDAM entity is only that's associated with the qualifying balance schedules, and all the other schedules or all the other LMPs that have these MCCs that you're referring to don't get this treatment.
That's true.
I think it really is important to make this distinction. In fact, I raised my hand before you commented because in the later section, I think it should be more clear that it's only those MCCs associated with the qualifying schedules at the
actually you're right. I retracted my comment.
Hey guys, James, let me help clarify how it's going to calculate. So each of these schedules will have a contract reference number associated with. These contract reference number will have source locations and sink locations. These source and sink locations will have specific nodes associated with it. So when we calculate the congestion difference, it will be based on the CRN's defined source and sink locations. So it actually is a difference we are calculating and going to provide it, because we will have it specified. Here is the contract reference number. Here is the supply contribution of congestion. Here is the sink's contribution of congestion. And the difference between the two is what is being allocated to the entity, and then as well as what is being adjusted in the balancing accounts of the CR offset or CR balance account of the BAAs where the constraint resides. Does that help?
It does very much, and I stand corrected. I should have never raised my hand. It is definitely a between.
Don't feel
Sorry for wasting
bad,
your
Ken.
time.
Yeah, don't feel bad.
No. Yeah.
And then maybe if I could just continue, I do think making that linkage to the qualifying schedules in the later section is, like, as is done here, I think appropriately, I think is in the section down below where you talk about the BPM calculations. I think you also need to make that clear, because yes, you're going to track all these MCCs everywhere, but it's only those that are associated with the eligible balanced self schedules that get this treatment.
Yeah, but Doug, I think I'm going to have that detail in the BPM, because then if there is any need to change it in the future, it's an easier change to make in the BPM without having to significantly change the tariff.
Right. I get that, James, but the problem I'm having with it is this first sentence that says the congestion difference
It's the contribution of
from the
qualified and balance.
contribution, but of the balance subschedule, that's fine. Okay, so
It's qualified and
it's
balanced.
already qualified there. Okay.
And then we say qualification is afforded to eligible long-term firm and monthly firm.
Okay. Yeah.
And you also, Doug, you also have to realize that this section here is also allowing me to make adjustments in both the congestion offset account of the BAA where the schedules are and the BAA where the constraint resides.
Yeah.
So you are, it's doing a dual purpose almost.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I missed the qualification in the first sentence, and I do appreciate the revision you made to make it very, John, to make it very clear that it's linked to the eligible long-term firm point-to-point and network rights.
Okay, great. That was very good discussion, and much appreciated. I think we're, we didn't make a lot of changes. We went from at to between, but I think talking it through helps everyone. So good job. I think, so for this section, let's see if there's any more raised hands or questions or anything.
We also have a hand raised from Alan Meck.
Okay.
Hey, Alan Meck, PG&E. So two things. One, I wanted to thank Kaiso for staying consistent with the policy development language that came from the policy development, being the clarifying that the transmission service that's eligible is long-term firm, monthly firm, and NITS rights, including conditional firm. I think that's appropriate. It was what was reflected in the WEM governing body approval and what for the Kaiso board approval, and what should be in the tariff here. So thank you guys for that. I wanted to ask one further question. We noticed that this seems to mirror language from the pro forma FERC OAT tariff. I would note that in section 1.19, the pro forma OAT does mention long-term firm point-to-point transmission service. And so I was wondering if that's what Kaiso is implicitly referencing here, and maybe we want to make that reference explicit. But then on the other hand, I'm not sure if you want to do that, because I do not see anywhere in the pro forma OAT a reference to monthly firm point-to-point. And so I'm not an expert on the pro forma OAT, I guess is what I'm saying. And it's a question that I'm putting to you guys, if you think that it's appropriate to include a reference to that, or if you think that it would make it less clear.
So Alan, yeah, I think that we do not want to refer that specifically to the pro forma OAT. In the prior version, we had said such as, and you can see it here, and we use the pro forma OAT. And so rather than going that route, of a sufficient duration, I think it'll be more clear if we just say that they're eligible. I get rid of this thing here. Eligible long-term firm and monthly firm. And then the key here is as defined under the EDAM transmission service provider tariff, because obviously they can differ from the pro forma. And so we're saying that it's all of these, but the EDAM transmission service provider may or may not have, I don't know, monthly, or I mean, the minimum duration is monthly. So I suppose maybe they all do. I don't know how, I'm not an expert either, but we think that this works. And if there's an OAT transmission service provider on the line that wants to weigh in on this, always appreciate support on that. But we think that this works.
Great.
We have a few more hands raised. Next in the queue, we have Meg McNall.
John, this is Meg McNall with Thompson Coburn for Six Cities. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. I had a similar comment to Alan on this language that you have highlighted in blue with the reference to eligible long-term firm and monthly firm point-to-point network service rights. On behalf of Six Cities, we're supportive of the change to the language that you're making here. I want to look at the whole set of revisions offline, and I'm hoping you'll post this newest version for everyone to look at, but I just wanted to reiterate the importance of including those references to the eligible types of transmission service here.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. We will post. So after this call, we'll clean this up and get rid of double red lines and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And we'll post a
Right.
final draft. Time is tight. I'm skipping ahead now, but we are targeting a filing as soon as this Thursday, June 26th.
Okay.
So if anyone sees something, please let us know.
And can I just ask one follow-up question where you have this language as defined under the EDM TSP tariff? Is it the CAISO's understanding that what the as defined under is already defined in the EDM TSP tariff, and you're not expecting to see any revisions to what PacifiCorp and PGE have filed as far as their EDM implementation language, or will they have to make any conforming changes, do you know, to their tariff provisions to implement this language?
My understanding is that they would not. So the two-tier or two-step allocation that was proposed and is pending in the PacifiCorp and Portland proceedings would not require revision and would implement this as drafted. That said, even other entities, could consider, that they would or would not afford they could come up with a single tier methodology and say, we're just going to give it all to measured demand or something. They're unlikely to do that, but it's their tariff. So we're just saying that we're going to make this adjustment for these eligible rights, and it has to be as defined under their tariff.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Next in the queue, we have a hand raised from Callie Wells.
Hi, it's Callie Wells with WPTF. Just making sure you can hear me okay.
We got you.
Great, thanks. So similar line of thinking or questions on this part of the language, but I think that last conversation helped me quite a bit. So I just wanted to make sure that while you guys in this language point to eligible long-term firm and monthly point-to-point and NITs, you still point to the EDAM tariff language. So ultimately, is what rights qualify kind of a combination of the two, because you guys point that the definition is in the EDAM transmission service provider tariff.
Right. Fair, Kelly. Kelly, the way I would answer that is what we're doing is we're establishing the boundary of this adjustment, right? So we're gonna provide this for these registered and eligible and balanced, CRNs that are associated with these long-term monthly firm point-to-point rights, and so that adjustment would be performed by the ISO, but at the same time, we may give that quantity of congestion revenue to the entity, and if they chose, I suppose they could spread all of it, including that adjusted quantity to measured demand. That's not what PacifiCorp and Portland have chosen to do, and we don't expect them to change that. But you know, this is the long-standing debate of discretion and all of that. So we're bounding ourselves to this language and limiting how far it goes to these types of rights. But we're going to be allocating this to the entity, and then the transmission service provider has its OAT, and so it's still going to sub-allocate, you know, under its tariff. And we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to define that under their tariff, including, you know, these which qualified rights meet these requirements.
Okay, that helps. And have you guys thought about what happens if what the EDAM transmission service provider defines conflicts with what's in your guys' tariff?
Then our tariff, well, we're not going to do anything else other than what's in our tariff. So they would receive a quantity associated with this. And if they had something in their tariff that required them to do something, you know, more than that, then they would be, you know, I guess short would be the way I would think of it. But if that helps.
Okay, I think that does. I'll think about that a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a hand raised from Todd Ryan from PG&E.
Hey, John, Todd Ryan, PG&E. I again echo everyone's comments and saying that this is definitely heading in the right direction, and appreciate you being responsive to all the stakeholder feedback. It seems to me that what you're doing is, yes, putting like a boundary on what the EDAM transmission service provider can define, and those two criteria are a term greater than 1 month and be firm service. And so I guess my thought is, why not just state it more explicitly to that? Say any contract that meets those two criteria.
Well, that is what this says. We just didn't want to restrict them on their end of what they do with it, you know, from there. Or they might say, well, we're only gonna, in tier 1, we're only gonna give this to long-term firm, not monthly point to point or whatever. I mean, that's just what so we're bounded, but yeah, but they're not. Yeah.
Understood. And it doesn't read to me like that it's that clear that CAISO's allocation between balancing areas is just solely restricted by only having firm and a term greater than 1 month. It reads a little more specifically of it is for monthly firm and for long-term firm. And so if the TSP were to define a long-term firm somehow that was shorter in duration than a month, which I don't know if that's possible, then it would conflict.
Right, and we wouldn't do this adjustment for those rights. They wouldn't get registered with this whatever flag for that treatment.
Okay, great, thanks.
James.
Hey, John. Yeah, so when they come in to register these rights, you're going to have OAT rights that are going to be of various durations and time. They have to, when they register, they're going to tell us explicitly which contracts and which OAT rights are eligible for this hedge. And in doing so, they are applying their tariff language as to what qualifies as to the OAT contracts that should be receiving the hedge. And we'll be using that information to distinguish between the various OAT contracts that they have registered.
So James, are you saying that if they told you that a 2-week product or a week product qualified, that you would allow it?
What I'm saying is, based on our tariff and their tariff, they would have to tell us that this is a monthly or long-term, and they would set this, they can set up a 2-week product, but that 2-week product, based on both our tariff and their pro forma tariff, does not qualify for this. So they would have to set it up and compliant with both tariffs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next in the queue, we have a hand raised from Jonathan Rumble.
Hello, this is John Rummel from Southern California, Edison. I guess, James, where I'm getting caught up with Todd is the word eligible appears to be referring to EDAM transmission service provider. It doesn't, and maybe and you could point this out to me in this language, which I think is where we're trying to get to. Eligible is, you said, is under CAISO's tariff and under the EDAM's tariff. Where in CAISO's tariff does it say it can't be a 2-week product?
James, I can try that. I see that here. So qualification. So we say up above that this will be afforded to qualified and registered balanced. So there's the registration down below, and then the balanced is the last schedule. So in order to initially the threshold, it's qualification. So we the ISO will afford qualification, and it's to eligible, and it has to be long-term firm or monthly firm point-to-point rights, including conditional firm. And then we say to link the two together as defined under the EDAM transmission service provider tariff. So they can't come to us and try to register a daily firm or weekly firm or something like that and seek this qualification. We would not register those rights through the procedures described and issue a CRN to facilitate this adjustment.
Yeah, I know. I read that. I just think that by virtue of the as defined under it, and I think maybe Todd, I don't want to speak for you, but where I'm getting caught up is it seems to read that the EDAM transmission service provider can actually define what a monthly and long-term firm contract, point-to-point or network or NIT service. I guess, why not just, sort of put the very sort of dull and tedious definition rather than an adjective?
Well, I'm not sure they can do that. Their tariff is, it's based on the pro forma. You can't just say a daily something is suddenly a monthly firm point-to-point, right? But you're asking for a period here afforded to eligible long-term firm and monthly point-to-point.
No, I'm actually asking for you're defining CAISO tariff, and I don't want to belabor it any more than I am. You're defining the product, the eligible long-term firm and monthly point-to-point network transmission, NITS rights. And you're doing it through sort of adjectives rather than, okay, this is what makes, let's just, you make it as clear as a bright blue sky. Exactly what do we, I think that's where some of us are getting caught up. And again, I don't want to speak for others, and maybe it's just my inability to read tariff language, but it just seems like just a little bit.
Well, I think you're hitting a point that is one of the reasons why we wrote it the way we are. Is each TSP has to file its own oath with FERC, and every oath may not have the exact same language defining on a monthly and long term. So for the ISO, who doesn't have oath transmission to try and define it I don't know if we have the ability to define it in a generic sense more than what we've done here that would cover all owed contracts or all owed tariffs. And so we're saying that they have to define it in their tariff, they have to file that with FERC, and we will be leveraging their definitions with FERC to align with our long-term monthly firm here.
This is Milos. If I can just jump in and see if I can provide a bit of clarity. Just under the open access transmission tariff, there's pro forma products, and those should be defined. Every transmission provider has it. Every transmission provider has to offer firm point-to-point transmission service of long-term and short-term duration specified by those long-term, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly. I think the only one that's not pro forma is hourly firm point-to-point, and entities have discretion to determine whether they offer it. But otherwise, between NITs and point-to-point, those are pro forma products of different durations that are already predefined under the tariffs of these transmission providers. And so I think here with this language, what we were just simply trying to note is, rather than defining long-term firm and monthly firm in the CAISO tariff, these are pro forma products that are defined in those EDAM entity transmission tariffs. We're just trying to note here, consistent with the policy, that what is eligible for the allocation from the CAISO of the parallel flow congestion revenues is the exercise of only long-term firm and monthly firm NITs and point-to-point rights, including conditional firm. That's what we will return, the parallel flow congestion revenue, to the entity. The entity under their tariff. Oh, go ahead.
So you could literally probably say something along the lines of qualification for this adjustment will be afforded to, those long-term firm point-to-point network, NITs rights that are greater than 1 month in duration.
Yeah, I think that's another way of framing it. I can remember now, John, we had it similarly framed before, but we were trying to be a bit more aligned with the board language here. But I think
just something to think about. Doing it just for whatever reason, it's just reading oddly imprecise.
Okay. Thank you. I'll defer to you, John. I'll turn it back over to you.
No, I appreciate that. We flopped around and we went to those that are greater than a month long-term firm. It's just the long-term firm and monthly firm is pretty well understood and in language. So and it was in the board memo and all that. So we went with that. But we'll give it one more thought before posting the final draft language. And if folks have continued concern about it, let us know, and we'll go from there. But I appreciate the dialogue and the feedback. It's certainly helpful to focus on these constructive points. How are we doing? We got one more?
Yeah, we have one more hand raised from Meg McNall.
Okay.
This is Meg McNall with Thompson Coburn for Six Cities again. I just wanted to follow on the discussion that we just had with John and Todd. I mean, one approach that could be considered if the concern is wanting to make sure that eligible long-term firm and monthly firm point-to-point NITs is sufficiently defined is you could leave the language sort of as you've drafted it and then insert a second sentence that simply states, and I'm kind of coming up with this on the fly, but you could state what is not going to be eligible, which is anything of a duration that is shorter than monthly and non-firm. That might just help give some comfort to the parties that are worried about making sure that this is defined in a way that is narrow, consistent with the final proposal. So I don't have particular language to propose. I could suggest something and send it to you offline, but that might be one way to handle this concern with wanting to make sure that these rights are clearly defined. Yeah, parenthetical would work too. just put in the tariff an affirmative statement that shorter term rights are ineligible for this treatment.
Do people think that would help, or are we going in the right direction? Or are we, I mean, we'll take this offline, but happy to hear any reactions. We have, like I said, we have time. This is it. We got one more thing to cover, but it's not much.
We have a hand raised from Todd Ryan at PG&E. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I agree with Meg's suggestion. I think that would help alleviate our concern that we're leaving some kind of small loophole open for things that are less than 1 month in term or non-firm.
Okay.
And I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time, John.
Okay. Well, this has been helpful. I'm going to keep going, and then we'll wrap it up here probably soon. To see where we are. There's just one more section. Yep, here it is down below. So this was another existing approved but not effective tariff language on the marginal congestion offset, also in 33.11, but later in that section, and it's talking about how the day-ahead congestion revenue amount will account for legacy contract adjustments, and then we added and any adjustment amounts for congestion revenue under 33. So this is again just tying it back from here to that section that we just spent most of our time talking about, just to tie that out. And I do believe that that is, yep, now we're back to the congestion revenue language. And so that is it for our tariff changes to implement this this amendment. And if there are no more questions, we'll give it one more round. I'll pass it back to Christina.
Thanks, John. I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this moment.
Okay,
Stacey?
well, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, no, I was just going to say thanks, and I'll pass it back.
Great, thank you. If we could go to the next slide. Next, we'll just be reviewing some next steps before we wrap up for the day. Next slide, please. As John mentioned earlier on the call, we'll be posting this updated draft tariff language shortly, and we're targeting Thursday, June 26th filing. And all meeting materials can be found on the Extended Day Ahead Market Initiative page. Any further updates that we have for you will be referenced in a notice. And if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to us at isostakeholderaffairs@CAISO.com. Next slide, please. Taking a final look, I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So next, we just have a few announcements before we wrap up today. Here you can see some of the meetings taking place at the ISO this week. Next slide, please. And here you can see business practice manual updates occurring this week, along with important publications and announcements. Next slide, please. And lastly, for insights into the ISO grid and market operations, be on the lookout for our Energy Matters blog, or you can always subscribe Here you can see our latest blog post regarding a new way of allocating congestion revenue for EDAM. And with that, we'd like to thank you so much for joining today's discussion. As a reminder, this meeting was recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. All meeting materials are available online, and the video file will be posted soon along with the updated draft tariff language. We thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.